right now, and we are live.
Oh boy! All right.
I am coming from you from a undisclosed location in
California.
mildly. I think we were at 78 today. It was 78 degrees and sunny today here in Southern California. And I want to welcome you to the Black Powder Podcast. I, as usual, am your real host, the only real libertarian, Marcus Matthews, the great Esquire. And as
that means lawyer, you can't say Esquire.
Yeah, you can't say that, dude.
I can say whatever I want to say. This is a free damn country as far as
America.
America.
I thought this was America.
Yeah.
I thought
Esquire.
pretend to be a lawyer.
That's my middle name.
And as somewhat usual, I am joined by my two co-hosts. I'm still missing my guy. Michael, I miss you. Please come. I need a reasonable Caucasian person on this podcast as a host. Instead, I am joined by former Florida man, Eric Parker, Bold Liberty.
What's up? Holding it down in North Carolina.
Yeah, he's in North Kakalaki now. So he's moved up the incest chain from cousin to sister, I guess, because you're Appalachian or whatever.
You're getting closer.
Yeah.
That's kind of work. Yeah. But it's weird. You go from like Florida,
he just keeps
swamp
alienating
people.
regions of the country.
Yeah,
the more you talk, the more people go, yeah, I'm out.
Yeah. Everyone in Appalachia just blocked this page.
And then secondly, I'm joined by, and I want to apologize in advance to the American people, and we do have international followers in Canada, Mexico, England, and Germany. But I'm also joined by Tub. Jacksonville, Florida.
I'm the one keeping it real in Florida.
And to keep the Florida narrative going, Florida mans,
And
Florida
Jacksonville.
women,
Florida,
and
they, thems.
Florida, whatever your pronouns are. We have our good friend, the Liberty Dad, DL Cummings, as our guest tonight. I want to thank you for showing up, DL, regardless of the two other people on the bottom. You know, I kept us people with some sort of melanin on top, and I put the
I got you.
The affirmative action hires below us.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're the affirmative action hire in this.
I
I
am.
think I got a darker tan than DL though.
Well, you know, that remains to be seen. You know, we're not getting 1080p or 4K right now. But and with my sunglasses, it's kind of all. When I go back and watch this,
I can't see none of y'all.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, are you going to let DL say something since you introduced him?
I didn't interrupt it. It was Eric.
Yeah,
It was-
anyway. Sorry. Hey,
Go ahead,
DL, say something.
Hi.
So,
Hey guys.
Introduce yourself.
DL Cummings, Liberty Dad. You might know me as Liberty Dad. Host of the Liberty Dad podcast. I am up way late past my bedtime. Like I would normally be like probably in bed right now, not lying. Probably watching TV. So don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm going to be snoozing.
I want to personally thank you for coming on. You know,
Sure.
Yeah.
I've struggled mightily with people from Florida over the last few months and about a year with Eric. And it's refreshing to have a person from Florida that's not drooling and doing little hand signs that show up on their screens. Yeah, this all that weird stuff. But we wanted to bring you on because I myself, as the only real libertarian, I'm struggling with this last election cycle because I want to point out something Eric and I discussed previously. So in 2016, Gary Johnson got around 4.3 million votes for president. And that's 2016. In 2020, Joe Jorgensen got over 1.3 million votes for her candidacy. This year, Chase was beaten by Jill Stein from the Green Party, as well as Robert Kennedy, who ran as an independent that was still on the ballot and got over roughly 750,000 votes. You know, Chase came in, the final total that I saw today was about 638,000. What happened to the Libertarian Party where we go from 4.3 million to just over 600,000 votes in a matter of what what was that, 12 years? So
2 cycles.
So,
2 cycles, yeah. 8
you know,
years.
that's an interesting question, and I'm not even sure that there's really a good answer, because here's the fun part. Donald Trump ran in 2016, 2020, and 2024, and there's wildly different results, right?
Right.
2016, Gary Johnson did fairly well. He also had a bigger name, a bigger presence. He at least was the former governor of Arizona, so that probably
New
lent.
Mexico.
New
I'm
Mexico.
sorry.
Mexico.
Yeah. What did I say?
You said Arizona. One of those states.
Same thing.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
right.
States.
Yeah.
It's no big deal.
Yeah,
What do you-
We don't
I'm
got any
Mexico.
followers from there. No, I'm just kidding.
That's-
Talk about as much as you want.
right. So, yeah, so he was the former governor, and that probably lent him some credibility. It also, at the time, I would argue, probably gave him some credibility with the media, because podcast hadn't quite blown up just yet at that point. Like, they were getting kind of big. And I think by Joe Jorgensen, that's when we really started seeing this thirst for candidates to go to like Joe Rogan and other podcasts like that. Like, so it hadn't blown up to the point where we were like, candidates for president need to go on a podcast. So I think that makes it very challenging, to kind of identify what's going on. The lazy answer, in my opinion, would just be to be like, Chase was woke, Joe Jorgensen was less woke, and Gary was less woke, or some crazy answer like that. I will say that it was always, in my mind, it was always a guarantee that the Libertarian Party was going to struggle this election around, because you simply had a Kennedy in the race, and Kennedys have money, they have name recognition, and what ends up happening, we live in a two-party system. So you have Democrats, you have Republicans, and then you have a third party. Like, people say, well, we'd love to have a third party. Well, we have a third party. We actually have multiple third parties. So I think what ends up happening is only one person really gets to have that spot. And so it seemed to me that because Kennedy had such a big name, he gobbled up that spot. And so then it was just like everybody else was fighting for table scraps. And so I think that kind of explains a little bit. Now, I don't know exactly what Chase did or did not do, but it does seem, when you look at the Greens, who have less ballot access than we do, and he lost to the Greens, and he claimed to go to all 50 states, then the question is, what did you do or what did you not do? Because if nothing else, we should have at least beat the Green Party. So I think, and I was pretty upset over that.
All right, so let me go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you think the Libertarian Party should own a little bit of the, I guess, responsibility on why their candidate did poorly?
Yes and no. I think it's, I personally believe that whatever level you are, the party is, whether it's a local, a state, or a national level, that there's kind of like this inherent obligation to support the candidates that are running at that level. And they did not support him in the way that I think they should have. However, the chair of the party, Angela, put out a list a while back, and she was like, look, here are all the things that I did for Chase. And I was like, well, I'll have to give it to her. Like, if she actually did all those things, then kudos to her. That sounds like she was putting in some effort. And then there was I heard some rumors that the Chase campaign wasn't as cooperative with the party. So I'm going to say yes, a little bit, but mostly I'm going to say no. And the reason is, when you're a candidate, and in Tub and Eric, you'll remember this, because when you guys came to the party and said, we're going to run for office, one of the first things I told you, I was like, you're going to have to earn every vote you get and do not expect support from the party. And I said, it's not because they won't support you because they don't like you or anything like that. I don't think that we have a good functional system to properly support candidates. Now, they actually ended up doing better than what I expected. But I think that what happens is, when you're a candidate, when you walk in, that's the environment that you should expect to have, right? You know what I mean? And you are taking on a particular role with the environment as is. And so therefore, it's largely going to be upon you to convince the party to support you in the way they need to. And if you think about it, guys, Tub, Eric, and Tracy did such a good job that the LPF reached out on their own to help. They wanted to help because they were excited. You guys got them excited. And so I would say it was Chase's job to get the LP excited. And, you know, he clearly didn't do that. And there might have been some disadvantages, but again, he's the candidate. And it's just an unfortunate reality for me.
But that's another issue of being the Libertarian Party, because I can tell you right now that if you're in part of the other two, you don't really have to excite them to make them back the candidate. And like what you're saying here was, well, listen, if our candidate doesn't excite them, they're not really going to, basically, they're not going to do their job. And I look at it, I go, we're supposed to be a political party, and our purpose is supposed to be these candidates, to support these candidates and moving them through. And so it's kind of a shame. Like you did, I was getting ready to say what you said was the first time we sat down and we talked, you said, hey, listen, don't expect anything from the party. Like just be ready to run this on your own, basically. And like, I got that. And you're right. They did kind of end up stepping up locally. But when I look at that, but should we have to excite them, the party, in order to make them support candidates?
Ideally, no. But we, like I said, we didn't have the infrastructure, which is one of the reasons why I told you guys, like, hey, don't expect support from the party. Not because I think the party was going to snub their nose, but just because we don't really have the infrastructure. Infrastructure being, I think the Democrat Party and the Republican Party are much more developed for the political scene. I think they clearly have bigger donors, and they have many more donors. So at that point, people that are looking for, like, they have donors, many of them, who are like, who can I support? I don't think we have that. So it's a little, it's a little different, right? Like, they're starting out the gate. So either if you're starting out the gate and you have some big donors behind you, you're already starting a lot further ahead than the Libertarian Party is. And I think that's going to help get some excitement behind you, because people can pay for ads to talk about you. They can, you know, pay to get you on, you know, different shows, all these different things. Whereas if you're in a third party, if you're a Libertarian Party, you got to figure out how to do all of that yourself. You're basically like the entrepreneur who's starting a restaurant, who wants to compete against like Ruth Chris and Benihana, right? Like, that's who you are. And so your fight, the resources that you have available to you are just simply different. And so you're starting with an uphill battle. So I will always put it largely on the candidates. Now that's not to say that I don't have any complaints or criticism necessarily for the party members, but at the end of the day, the reality is, I have, like, if you're a candidate, you have to earn my vote. You have to earn my support.
Oh,
You have
Greg.
to earn my money. You have to earn all those things. And it doesn't matter whether I'm a party member or just somebody that's going by. You still have to earn it.
Okay, I want to make one quick point. Your hybrid Ruth Chris Benihana idea is absolutely genius, and I hope, yeah, we need to patent that, because if you can combine those two restaurants, that would just be one of the most incredible experiences you could ever have.
Well, that would be the Republican and Democrat Party combined, the Uniparty. So we already got that.
I think we're there.
But I wanted to point to,
and we're a food truck parked in the hood trying to sell crab legs. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And out of season crab legs. So I wanted to get to this point about McCardle patting herself on the back for a Libertarian RFK being in the cabinet. First of all, I don't think he's the Libertarian. I think he was
in my opinion.
He was expedient in his backing of the candidate, because the writing was on the wall when he dropped out that Trump was probably going to take this, you know, regardless of what people's feelings are. But he had all the momentum after he got shot at, and, you know, blah, 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 you know. And I want to take time to point out that American people have very short memories. Because I'm a Libertarian. I was not voting for Joe Biden, Joe Biden, I was with them in that crowd. I think he was a terrible president. He was absolutely horrible.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I had that same feeling about Donald Trump because, he cost my son a year of baseball. He bragged about shutting down the nation. There is a video of that. I have it somewhere on my phone amongst my almost 1 terabyte of memes. There's a video of him bragging about shutting down the country. And I did not, they talk about, everything was cheap. I was like, of course it was cheap. It was just the natural the level of inflation at the time. And then when you shut down a country, you shut down all the mechanisms of this economy and then expect to start them back up. Of course, there's going to be inflationary pressures on the economy. And that's what we're coming off of, the fact that he shut down this country. And then we have these inflationary pressures. And you're like, oh, this dude's doing a terrible job. Let's give him the ball to the guy that started off this drive. If it was 4 downs, the first down under Trump was negative 15 yards. The second down under Biden was negative 30 yards. And now we're at 3rd and 45. And everybody's like, let's give the ball back to the guy who had first down. That's the way I
lost less yards than the other guy.
Well, I'm very glad that I understand politics, because I would not have understood the analogy because I don't follow football.
Okay.
So none of that made sense, but I understand that, like, Trump started it, Biden continued with it, and now we're giving it back to Trump. So I got that far.
Yeah.
But let's address what she asked, because what she asked was the way it was presented, that technically Kennedy is going to turn into the promised libertarian.
So let's so I saw the tweet, and let's be honest, what she said was it was something to the effect of, he's not the libertarian that we hoped for, so maybe we'll get 2 libertarians. So it sounded to me like she somewhat was recognizing that, hey, this isn't really what I meant. That's my impression. I don't know that that's what she was trying to convey, but just reading it, that was my impression. Like, hey, this is not quite what I meant, but I'll take it anyway. Right. And then hopefully now we'll get 2. But in my opinion, he is a member of the Libertarian Party. That doesn't mean a whole lot. Lots of people are a member of the Libertarian Party. And a lot of other libertarians, even ones that have supported Trump, would gladly say that person, was not a real libertarian, Bill Weld. Right. So, and they did. They complained about it. They were like, oh, he's not a real libertarian. I can't believe we did this, and they threw a big fit. So, but I don't really like this idea of like, who's a real libertarian, who's a not libertarian. So what I did on my show, what I said was, I was like, all right, let's break this down. At convention, when he was nominated, he got booed twice. Hector Roos and some other guy from, I think, Pennsylvania went up, and they nominated RFK for the Libertarian for president for the Libertarian Party. He got booed, loudly booed by most of the crowd. And then a few moments later, there was another opportunity for the crowd to boo, so they booed him again. And then he got 19 votes and was out in the first round. 19 votes out of 1,000 delegates. So what that tells me is that the delegates have kind of said, we don't see him as much of a libertarian either, because they booed him for, when he was trying to be nominated. And then he only got 19 votes out of 1,000. That's like, that's very, very low. So for me, I just kind of fall back and I say, whether he is or not is not as relevant as the fact that as much as the delegates never saw him as much of a libertarian.
But I think the issue of whether he is or not, the problem is not even what you're talking about there. It's more of they're going to use it to save face and say, no, look, Trump fulfills his promise to us because we are being effective in getting into Trump's world and having to recognize us. And I think that's going to be the issue.
Yeah, it will be the issue. We'll pick it apart. And then the reality is, if you're the chair, your job is to kind of do that. Right.
My problem is, it's, to me, I think it's a lie. So I don't think it's the job of the chair to lie to the members of the party. But let me back this up. I've read the tweets. They said technically he was registered libertarian in the state of California. And someone said, might have been the same tweet from McCardle, that he was registered libertarian in California for a number of years. So explain to me how he was able to be a primary candidate on the Democrat originally, running as a Democrat originally in the Democrat primaries as a registered libertarian. Is that a rule in our bylaws? Or are we just saying he's been a member because he paid his dues? You know what I mean? Well, that's my point. But someone actually said he's a registered libertarian in the state of California and has been for several years.
I can't speak to that. I didn't see that tweet. I can't speak to it. But
that's where I think that is a lie.
A registered libertarian is not the same as a member of the party.
Yeah, I understand
because I don't believe
that.
To be a member, you have to be registered, not at least nationally.
And that's my
level. You do.
That's my critique. Like
Florida.
Let's acknowledge that the guy that was a registered Democrat and trying to run as a Democrat and got kicked out of their party, which I disagree with, from the DNC. Let's just say, had he ran from the beginning as a libertarian, had he went to state conventions as a libertarian, had he fought for the nomination, he could have likely won it, but he didn't do that.
Probably.
He went to California. He went to the Free State Project or New Hampshire, whatever. And he went to our national convention. But had he put the work in like the other libertarian candidates did, and he won our nominee, and then he became the cabinet member, I would say, good job, Angela McCardle. You upheld your end of the bargain. The difference is that's not what happened. He ran as a Democrat. He got kicked out. And I think that's not on him. That's on the DNC for being corrupt. But we shouldn't let the fact that that's how it happened to be like, oh, look, I bent the knee to the establishment, the uniparty, meaning Angela McCardle. And now look, guys, I grant you this libertarian, not the one y'all wanted. He's not. It doesn't count. He was a Democrat.
If she got another one, it's not two. It would be one. Like the way I put it, I said, I didn't realize that the guy who wanted to primary as a Democrat, who ran as an independent, and then openly endorsed the Republican is the libertarian. I didn't know that's how it worked.
So
that math doesn't add up.
Right. So when I've been tweeting about it, I'm just like, look, we're still waiting for a libertarian, because as a rule of thumb, I don't like to say this person is or is not a real libertarian. I just find that to be a very unproductive conversation. So that's why I went with, hey, the delegates did not see him as the expected libertarian that we were promised. So we're still waiting for that expected libertarian, which would be somebody that we generally recognize ahead of time. Yeah, this is a libertarian. Like if it was like a Scott Horton, right? Like pretty much everybody's gonna be like, yeah, he's a libertarian. Like there might be a few wackos that'll argue the point, but most everybody's gonna be like, yeah, he's a libertarian, right?
I beg to differ. I beg to differ.
You don't think most people
would? One, look at my moniker that you're seeing on the screen, Marcus Matthews,
right?
The only real libertarian. I am a real libertarian. There is no doubt in anybody's mind. I'm the only real libertarian. Everybody else
isn't the appointment. It's a fraud.
I will assign them libertarian titles.
Here's the thing, though. So if we're talking about that we have a level of influence into the Trump administration, then we should have been able to go with a list of about 5, 6, 10 people and go, hey, we would like you to pick one of these as the libertarian that you're seeing, and then put them where they belong. But it seems like our influence was really none at that point. We're kind of hoping.
I don't think we've demonstrated influence.
What's that?
No.
I don't think we've demonstrated any influence just yet. I'm not going to say that it's not there, because there's still time, but I don't think we've demonstrated. I don't think it's been demonstrated that we have influence. Here's why. A number of people have made this point. They're like, hey, freeing Ross is an easy thing. It doesn't cost any political capital. Right. Yeah, and I'm like, okay, well, if it doesn't cost anything for Trump, then it's like throwing table scraps at the beggar. And then the beggar, like, I've got influence. No, you don't. They just threw you some scraps that they weren't going to eat anyway. And so I look at it and I say, now, don't get me wrong. President Biden, President Trump, whoever should free Ross, period. And President Trump did say, I will free Ross on day one. He should be held accountable for that. He should be held accountable for every single promise that he has made. We won't do that as a country, but he should be.
In the very same 2-minute video from our convention, it says he will free Ross and that he will put a libertarian in the cabinet right at the same time.
Right.
Now here's what's going to happen. Let me ask you. If Ross doesn't get freed, can we then go, hey, we got absolutely nothing here? Because now they're putting a lot of weight on the fact that, well, forget about the other stuff that was promised. Ross is getting freed on day one. So if he doesn't, because here's what's going to happen. Politics is going to play into this. That once it comes up, and even if Trump is considering it, there are going to be people surrounding him that go, this might not be a good idea.
Right.
Because they're going to bring up what he did, and that's going to make him go, whoa, hang on. Because it could open up a whole lot of other issues by just letting him go.
Right.
And so I think they're going to run that risk.
Yeah, I think so. And the interesting thing is you never know what kind of argument that somebody's going to make that will convince Trump, right? They could come out and say, well, he himself wasn't a drug dealer, but he created a website that people sold drugs on. Is that what you really want your name attached to? Right. And then Trump might have to rethink that. And here's the reason why I say it's problematic, because if freeing Ross is something that he's doing that doesn't cost any political capital, then that means for lack of a better word, we have no leverage over him. We have nothing to incentivize him to follow through on that promise, because it's not a big deal. If it was a big deal, then he has to consider, is that something that I want to promise? Because this could go bad for me if I don't keep up with this promise. But if it's something that's trivial to him, not to Ross, not the reality, but if it's something trivial politically to him, if it's like, oh yeah, I can just free this guy, that's an easy promise to make to him, or to them, then he can make that, and he can also break it at the same time. Because again, there's no political capital that's lost on his part. He's not losing any already by making the promise. And what's he really going to lose if he breaks the promise? Probably.
Well, let me point this out about Trump, and I want everybody to pay careful attention in this. He only has 3 years. You talk about a 4-year term. Trump is only there for 3 years, because that last year, he is a lame duck president that can't run again. And people aren't going to hitch their fortunes onto him in that last year. So he has 3 years to enact his agenda. And what bothers me the most is the fact, right now Democrats are doing a self-reflection period. Who's to blame?
Not really. Very poorly,
blame Biden, because Biden was supposed to be a one-term president. If I was a Democrat, I would this is Biden's fault, because his old ass knew he didn't have a cognitive. There's no freaking way he didn't understand that this is not his game anymore. He needs to pass the baton, as old as he is. Trump is what, 77, 78, whatever he is.
Right.
He was the oldest president ever elected. I'm not saying he won't have his full faculties about him. I'm just saying the fact of the matter is they don't have to. He's no longer a influence in the sense of what he is now in 3 years. So Trump has 25, 26, and 27. The presidential election cycle is going to begin at the end of 27 and 28. Nobody's talking about former President Trump anymore.
Right. Well, for libertarians, he has day one.
Yeah.
That's how long he has day one.
You have a promise on day one, and if you don't meet it, my question is there a cabinet position that does presidential pardons? Because that to me would be the perfect appointment for a libertarian, because we can
that's only the president's power.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying though. But is there?
But,
Like,
it
mean,
would be
is
an
there-
advisory board like the
yeah,
douche.
advisory. That wouldn't be a cabinet appointment, and it wouldn't meet the requirement. But I would almost take that as a consolation prize. Like, hey, look, an advisory board for someone that does pardons. For libertarians, that'd be great. We look at your civil rights, and we essentially say the government did you wrong, and we'll help the president make those. But my issue is that I made a post recently that there are 678 U.S. federal agencies, and the Libertarian Party bent the knee for one appointment. And I made a joke like, for all we know, it could end up being getting appointed to hold on, the Arctic Research Commission. They would literally send our libertarian to Antarctica, and you're stuck there for 4 years in a basement in the Arctic for 4 years. Like that,
that
would be a libertarian appointment.
That's
my point.
Bad idea.
Now, so let's pick the libertarian we like the least, like Toad or whatever, and let's send him there for 4 years.
Toad.
No, Toad.
No,
I said Toad.
I would say,
whoever you don't like, let's send them there for 4.
I was saying Angela.
Whatever. Angela McCardle for 4 years.
Yeah.
To the DL's laughing. He didn't want that caught because this. Like, let's send them there for 4 years, and then you will have met your promise, your obligation.
But our issue is that we gave everything up front with hope of a promise for the after. Like he already got what he wanted from us. So
who the hell was told?
If he doesn't do it, what are we going to do?
It's just some guy.
Like, what are we going to do? They're like, we don't hold the weight that we say we do or that we want to.
No.
We're done. He can completely ignore us, and he won't lose any of his political capital for that.
Right. And to be honest with you, I think that I think we will get ignored. I'm not confident. I still have a little bit of like I'm not negative. I'm not feeling negative about Free Ross just yet. Because his own son did, make some tweets about freeing Ross.
I think it'll happen.
And so I think it actually will happen. So at this particular point, I have hope for that. I'm losing hope very rapidly on a cabinet appointment. And so I don't think that's going to happen. And here's the other thing. Most importantly, from my read of the numbers, I know libertarians like to say, hey, we helped put Trump into office. I look at the numbers and I don't think that's the case.
He won by so much more than us.
Because I look at somebody tried to point out PA numbers, and I looked at PA numbers and I evaluated like this year and some prior years. And I was like, based on what I'm seeing here, no, I don't think that we actually helped carry him the win. And then the other states, what was it? Wisconsin and I can't remember. There's another state, maybe Michigan, but I was like, nope, those states, not those either. So I don't think that we can actually claim that we helped deliver a win, which means
it was the Puerto Ricans.
So if I, as a lowly podcaster, not a big, huge podcaster with all kind of resources, if I've come to this conclusion and if I'm correct, then certainly his team and every other team out there in the future will be able to come to this conclusion as well. And they'll know, hey, you know what? We'll just dangle this thing over the libertarians and maybe they'll get on board. Maybe they won't. And that'll just give us the extra numbers just in case, but we're probably going to be fine without them.
So what does that do to us moving forward?
I think it even further diminishes our ability to negotiate, because again, when you're negotiating, you need to have something that incentivizes the other person to hold up their end of the deal. What did we have? Well, if we didn't have the votes, then we had nothing. And now a lot of libertarians are like, well, he's talking about, some of these things that we appreciate are being talked about. So they're like, oh, the old Overton windows being moved. And I was like, debt spending, all, too much government, all of this has preceded my whole life. The Overton window has allowed us to talk about all of these things my entire life and even longer. and they're still getting worse. So just getting the Overton window moved, I don't think is enough. And I definitely don't think it's enough to start celebrating. This is why, like I was making, I've been kind of subtly making fun of libertarians. Maybe that's why they probably all got me on mute. I don't know. But when Matt Gaetz, when it came out that Matt Gaetz wasn't going to be the pick for AG, I was like, see, this is what I'm trying to tell you, people. Stop celebrating. What they should have done, libertarians, but if they really wanted Matt Gaetz to be in there and they thought that was going to be, toward their aligned with their goals, then what they should have done was said, spread the word and said, call up your representative and demand that they will support Matt Gaetz or any pick for that matter, right? And then once he becomes, or whoever becomes once it's official, then you celebrate. Nothing is certain until it happens.
Yeah.
And the problem that we're having with the party right now is people are celebrating just because they got heard. It's like that. I'm doing analogies tonight. It's like the girl, the guy who the person that they had a crush on finally says their name and they're just thrilled and excited. They're like, oh my God, they just said my name, and the person was like, can you move? Fred,
Well,
can you move?
I
Like,
want
"They
to
said my
point
name."
something out. When you said "you people" during that, that was
I meant all the black
very eloquent.
libertarians. So
No,
just
no.
one.
That was quite eloquent in what you just said right now. But when you said "you people," I immediately thought about Tub and Eric, and those
Yeah.
are the "you people."
The minorities.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I've struggled with this fact that libertarians do not understand that they need to speak to all people.
Yes.
They need to speak to blacks, Latinos, Asians about the message. If I missed out on your ethnic group, screw you. You're not that big in the
We
fold.
got the important ones.
You're not
They
important.
just unfollowed the podcast.
Yep.
Yeah, kick rocks. You
Us
know
four.
what I'm saying? Yeah. But the fact that the Libertarian Party, who has a message that should naturally resonate with black people in the war on drugs, in the government in your life, in government telling you how you need to raise your kids and educate your kids.
Right.
The fact that libertarians can reach out to those groups, to Latinos who also are affected by the same things.
Mhm.
And I've said this, and I've tried, in the last few weeks, I have done an experiment. I reached out to people that were disappointed with the election results. And there's one black group that I'm in on Instagram. I told them I'm not voting for Kamala or Trump. I'm voting for the party that actually believes in liberty and involves themselves in things that will make the black community better. I got so much pushback.
Mhm.
Black people were like telling me, "Oh, so they just naturally assumed I'm a Trump voter," when I specifically said in my original statement I'm not voting. I called him chump. I
Right.
said I'm not voting for chump, and they pushed back against me with such vigor. I was like, "Is this mission impossible?
Right.
Can I not get this message across that these people are not our friends and never have been our friends?" And the fact that the Libertarian Party does not reach out to black people, I think it's a losing proposition going forward if you don't expand the tent.
Yeah.
Because that's what Trump said he did, and he did it in major inroads, mainly in the Latino community. It was
Right.
maybe plus 3-4% with black men. It was negative 3-4% with black women.
Right.
But the fact that he gained so much in the Latino community because he had a message that they resonated with them.
Mhm.
Why can't the Libertarian Party put forward a message that resonates with those groups that are so disenfranchised with the Uniparty?
So we have a problem in the party where you have a lot of members that want to stay away from identity politics, which is fair,
Yeah.
and I get it. However, what they need to realize is that you still have groups that have common interest and common concerns. So you need to address those groups. So, For instance, my wife is Asian. She is, and Asians will have different things as a group that they share in common that they're concerned about than the Black community. Now, there'll be some things that are shared across the lines for everybody, things like taxes and, stuff like that. But there are going to be specifics that groups will have. And it's okay, in my opinion, to say, oh, the Black community has this issue with policing. Guess what? We have some answers for that, right?
Yeah.
The Asian community, they're kind of upset because, colleges are doing these weird things and they're not getting in the colleges, even though they've, worked, they've been doing math since they were like 2 years old or younger. Right. And, they're expecting to get into Harvard with like, a 7.8 grade average. And so they're upset about, like, hey, we got answers for that. So what we need to do is we need to recognize that you can separate the idea of identity politics from groups, and groups have certain things in common and, shared experiences. And we have answers for those things. And that's what we need to talk about. And we don't, because I think people conflate the two. They conflate them, because the moment you start saying that, people are like, I don't want to talk about that. I don't talk about this. I don't talk about identity politics. And it's like, but you want to talk about where people are. You want to talk about what's affecting them, what they feel.
I think that we have an issue that piggybacks on that, though. Because, all right, so here's how I've explained this before. I said, and I'll use the church, for example. Hey, Marcus, that's where those of us who know Jesus and love him, that's where we go. Mm-hmm. So inside of that, so if I use the church for an example, and I said, imagine you come up to a new church and you got two members. Like, one's the door greeter and they're standing there just yelling and fighting with somebody in the parking lot, yelling across the parking lot. Like, you're going to come up to you and go, you know what? I'm not going. Like, I don't want to be a part of that. And that's what happens. So here's the thing. We can go out, and I think we can do exactly what DL just said and what you said, Marcus. We can go out and do that and tell them, hey, we do indeed have the best message. In fact, the first time I ever spoke to a room of libertarians, I said, listen, as soon as I got up there, the first thing I said was, listen, libertarians have the best message and the worst messengers. And so inside of that, what happens is I think that we can get them in, but do you see us? Even if we get them in, we are not a group right now that people want to stay with. They're going to come and go, those are great ideas. And once they actually see us, listen, right now I will tell you. So my wife is still a Republican. And the reason why she absolutely refuses to leave that is she's not against libertarian ideas. She's against the libertarians.
Right.
That we ruin it completely. So if we don't start doing some changes inside the party, it makes no difference who we reach. They will leave. And if we don't believe that, look at Justin Amash. Justin Amash is a perfect example. We had him. We lost him. We lost him. We basically said, here, we're not going to do anything for you. And I think we run the risk of doing a lot of other people as they start coming in.
Yep.
They don't have the thing that says, I want to be here. And so we can have the great message going out and we can bring them in, but they're not going to stay.
I know some libertarians that I respect within the party, former candidates, hopefully future candidates, that are contemplating right now, why do this as a registered libertarian candidate? Because you look at it from the no. All right, so we got support locally from our chair and our party, but the ones that don't support you deserve critiquing. And that's where DL and I might disagree on a thing or two, but you supported us as candidates. You did everything you could. You know what I mean? Like, on a local level, it's a little bit different. I'm just saying, I know people that have ran. They've ran more than once, maybe. They didn't get any support. And they're saying, why even do it if the party doesn't have the tools and resources to help me get elected? And, we've ran as libertarians on principle the first time we ran. You know what I mean? So why do it again as libertarian? Talk us off the ledge, DL. Come on.
Well, let me expand on that quite literally.
Yeah. Or Mark, go ahead.
Let me expand on that before we hand it off to DL. Because I got a voicemail today about going to my local libertarian convention, or the libertarian, I forgot which one it was. But they were like, you make sure you're registered with the Libertarian Party, which I am nationally and in California. I paid for both. I think it was roughly $54 or $60 for both of them. Where the hell is that money going? When you talk to libertarians that register with the Libertarian Party, where does that money go? Where we can, because they charge you when you go to the conventions, and oftentimes
Buy
and
all
all
the
of that stuff.
packages. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I register as a libertarian, what is that? What am I getting for my money? Is to expand on Eric's point.
Well,
Right.
I mean, like, and that's my thing is like, I think a lot of it is wasted on nonsense that shouldn't be part of a political party. But I digress. Like convention, state, national, local, even like that, you could break that down by state if they do a good job with the resources or not. You know what I mean? And we could spend 50 episodes doing all 50 states and whether they do a good job with the resources. But DL, how do we keep libertarians from leaving the Libertarian Party to run as a uniparty candidate?
So I think that's really an individual decision, right? I think it's going to be very difficult because there's like, and I'm not saying this in the, I don't do the collectivism. There really is no we, because like I could come up with an idea, you could come up with an idea, Tub could come up with an idea. And so we all have, and Marcus could come up with an idea. We could all have 4 different ideas on how we need to do this. And so then we're going to end up butting heads, right? And so I think the message needs to be like, look, there are people that can be excited in the party. You can do some things, and it's probably going to be at the local level is going to be the easiest for you. And this is what I've always told people in the local party. I said, look, if you're not interested in the headache of national, which most people really aren't, and it's a headache, right? There's a lot going on there. And there always has been. This is not like new. I'm not like saying, oh, now that there's Angela here, it's a lot. No, it's been like that ever since I was a member, 2017, or 2018, since I started really paying attention. I just noticed that there's just a lot going on. It's a headache. It's hard to keep up with. There's drama. There's all that good stuff. And so if you don't have the desire for that, stay local. Stay local. You're going to get better support locally. Now, the thing is, when it comes to like national and maybe even state, you might find, because of those levels, that you might have maybe some more donors, because donors and voters tend to be more interested in state level and national level politics. I mean, you guys saw this. Like, you would go somewhere and people are like, so what'd you think about abortion? And you're like, city council.
Shut up, Tracy. Don't answer that. That's what we
Right?
always say.
Right? Like, people would ask me that, right? And they're like, what, they're like, what do you think about that? And I'm like, and you're like, well, I think we should talk about something that's related to city council that I would have power
Deflect.
to vote on.
Deflect.
Right?
Yes.
Right. There's nothing there's nothing for, it doesn't matter what I think about it. I could think it was the greatest thing in the world and everybody should have one at least once, or I could think it was a terrible thing, and it's not going to change what my duties are if I get elected. Right. It doesn't matter. And so I think we just tell people, we like say, look, stay local. The other reason I say stay local is I think, and maybe it's just been my experience, but I think it's easier to get the camaraderie that you're looking for when you have to sit down and look at people in the eyeball, right? And you have, like, that's who you got to work with. When it's national, if I don't want to support Angela, I could go off and say, well, this person over here would be a totally better chair. Yeah, they should run for 2026, right? And so I could say that, and so I could find somebody else. It's not as easily done at the local level. So I think that you tend to, at least my experience was that people tend to be a little bit more willing to work it out, at the local level. And more importantly, local, I believe local is where the reality is. Like, there are things that happen at the national level that are important. But I told somebody this the other day, I said, most people, I'm willing to bet, if you ask them to sit down and write down a couple of things that made their life better or worse, tangibly, that we could validate with some sort of metric because of who the president was, I'm willing to bet that very few people could. Probably the most would be people that were, like, say, when Obamacare was initiated and their insurance changed. That's a pretty dramatic change. So people in that particular sense would be able to. But I think a lot of the things that a president does don't really impact our life. You know, my wife has been living in the country since she was 18. And if you ask her, like, who is the best president that you had to, live in the United States under, she'd be like, I don't know. They're all the same to me. Like, she wouldn't really care, right? Because like none of these, like, I think most people would be like that if they were honest. They would say, yeah, most of these policies aren't really directly affecting me. They may not be good for the country, but they're not really directly impacting me. They're not hurting it's not like I was making a whole lot more money under Trump, and then Biden got elected, and all of a sudden I got a pay cut. Like, that's just not how it works.
I want to expand on what you said, and to Joy's point right here, because Trump and Eric are both the same to me. They're all,
yeah, a lot like our presidents.
And that's
look,
not,
I was going to say, like,
that's not racist.
Did I say something racist?
No.
Yeah, you said Trump and Eric are the exact same people to you, and I agree with you on that. And incest is
I think a libertarian's proper example would be like, they've all stunk. Like, every president in my lifetime,
right,
terrible.
This was America.
Well, we judge them on the policies that we like or don't like. We don't really judge them on how it actually impacted our life in most cases.
I blame public education for that, because public education, a lot of people want to talk about indoctrination in a public education, and there is indoctrination in public education.
Right.
The primary indoctrination in public education is telling you that your government is omnipotent, and it was this grand experiment of success from day one, when in fact it's been a tyrannical government since the Whiskey Rebellion. And if you want to go even further back than the Whiskey Rebellion, it was Bacon's Rebellion, when we started splitting society into groups. And then they tell you that this was a grand experiment that has led us to this glorious point in our history of our country, when in fact, only thing that our government has done since 1776 is expand its threshold of power over your life.
Right.
And that's where I think the Libertarian Party was an affront to the anti-individual liberty that the people that founded this country, as flawed as they were, and I say that as strong as possible as the black man, they were extremely flawed. But the concept of America is of a divine nature. This was God's will, where he said we would have free will over our lives to see fit to be successful or not. Where you said, I can wake up in the morning and be what I want to be. That's what America was. It has never lived up to that fact, because there's always been, the only entity in the history of mankind that has removed your right to free will and to do as you please without harming others is government. Whether it be left wing, right wing, middle, whatever aspect of government you ever want to talk about, the only entity that has stopped you from being a free individual is the government under which land you reside.
Right.
So are we coming to a point then, because we know it all at all the levels, it's no good. And can we also add to that we know the Department of Education is not going to get abolished? Okay, so now with that, not happening. Now, are we coming to a point where we say, hey, we don't need the LNC? Or we can basically pare it down to about 6 or 7 people to just do the role that is absolutely essential for, because all the stuff that they're doing is pretty much unessential compared to, from my understanding, to our bylaws and all. It's unnecessary. It can be way smaller. So are we coming to the point where we say, hey, let the LSC have their 6 people to make sure we're organized and really lean into the state parties and the local affiliates and things along those lines? And would that help us or hurt us?
I don't know if we're coming to a point where we actually need fewer people on the LNC, because I'm not entirely certain the rationale that went into determining why the number that we have. So like, could they consolidate some of the regions? I mean, obviously you need the 4 officers, but then after that, could some of those positions be consolidated? Maybe, I don't know. I simply just don't have that information. However, I think we are and should be at a point where people should really focus more locally and at their state level because it's the closest to them. And I think the same that applies to your government applies to your party, right? The further it is away from you, the less of a voice you have because there's more people that have a voice in that. And so then you have more competing interests. It's just a natural reality, right? Like this is not a good or a bad thing. It's just the way that it works. Hey, you've got one body that's representing every libertarian in the country. Well, naturally, there's going to be a lot of disagreement in the same way with Republicans and Democrats, which I'm sure that they have their squabbles, you know. But I think that we are at a point where we should start recognizing that it is really, really important to focus on the local level because that's where we have the better chance of disrupting some of this federal, what I would say, overreach. That's
They
where
lost.
it happens.
At that
Yeah.
local level, can you give a good reason or explain out why a candidate should run as a libertarian as opposed to a Republican or Democrat?
Yes. So when you're running as a libertarian, I think number one, if that's who you are, I mean, don't just run just to be like, I'm going to run as a different party. But if you believe in the ideas of liberty, the foundations of libertarianism, which I would argue are self-ownership. If you believe in self-ownership and then, the ideas that spring forth from that, I think the best way to get the conversation, the door open so that you can tell people that there's something different is to be something different. If you just come along and you're like, I'm a Republican and I'm different. I mean, we've all heard that we've heard that forever. I'm a different kind of Republican. And some of them are. Like there are some that are, yes, they are different. They're not the establishment or they've got a slightly different twist on things. Same thing for Democrats, right? You had the Bernie Sanders and the AOCs who were slightly different. You also have them in, the Thomas Masseys, the Justin Amages, those folks, right? Who exist in the Republican Party, but they're different. But because there's so many of them, it's kind of hard for them to stand out because, I mean, we've got like what, 3-4 names, maybe 5 names of people in a different party that we all would look and say, that's a person that I can respect politically, even though they're on a different team. So I think locally, the best way to get that door open is to run as a libertarian. And so then you say, I'm a libertarian. Oh, what are you about? Well, now, I mean, because if you're in person, right? So now that door is open. Well, we believe in something a little different. Here's how we believe. And I've had some of these same conversations. I'm like, yeah, I'm the chair of the Libertarian Party. And like, really? What's that about? And so then people will ask me questions and it opens a wide door. But here's the cool part. When that door opens, it's already opening with, this is something different. Because most people don't even know what a libertarian is. So they're like, well, tell me what a libertarian is. So now I have the opportunity. If I'm a Republican, what I first have to do is I have to dial back what they think I might be based on their impression of a Republican or Democrats or whatever.
Now, the thing is, like, remember, because we did run locally as libertarians and it did not make things easier, even though it gave us an opportunity.
Well, I didn't say it'd be easier. I'm just saying opening the door for the conversation itself would be a little easier.
Let me ask you this. If Eric in particular, if Eric had run as a Republican in that same race
with Terrence Freeman,
yep.
Another Republican.
I believe there's a greater chance that Eric wins that seat.
Maybe.
Because remember, we saw it locally. We saw what happened when we were under the moniker, under the label of libertarian. They attacked the libertarian aspect.
Right.
We saw it. So I look at that and I start, because now I'm leaning in this area where, okay,
but they would have done it if you were a Republican, right? They would have been like, he's a rhino, he's a this, he's a that, he's not a real Republican, he's just a wolf in sheep clothing, whatever. They would have said something, right?
I mean, they would have probably said he's a redneck or so. I might not have won the black vote, which I did in
No, hell no, I would never vote for your ass.
But
No, we said
the-
black.
no.
Oh, wow. My bad. I'm paper sack brown. That's what I do.
No, I'm just
Hey,
saying.
you're
like,
on TV, so kind of.
I won the black vote in Jacksonville because I wasn't a Republican and I ran against a black Republican. You know what I mean? Like, but I didn't win the election. I didn't win the election because a bunch of people, I don't know, I think saw LPF on the ballot and said, "What does that mean?" and just left it blank.
Right.
There were
So
like
here's the
50,000
catch.
people didn't vote. I don't know.
Right. So
It's a high number, but
here's the interesting thing about that. One of you guys, I don't remember if it was Tub or you, but somebody had told me that there was kind of like this saying: the first time you run to get name recognition. The second time you run to win. So remember, the really phenomenal thing about the 36% that you got is that
34 and a half. Don't oversell it.
We went from a yeah, if you don't vote for Eric, you ain't black. The really interesting thing about that is that we weren't an established party that people already recognized. The party itself was pretty obscure to most every voter in Jacksonville. Then on top of that, you were not an established politician. So it's not like you had any level of name recognition coming out. It's not like you had previously been in administration or, were just a really popular businessman or something like that. You were literally just a regular person that kind of came out of the woodworks and said, I'm going to run. And through your hard work, in the time where you might say, this is where you make a name for yourself, your name got 35%, 34.5%, 35%, right? So imagine if you had not left and you said, I'm going to run again.
You're putting this on me now.
Well, no, we're just using the illustration, right?
Kidding.
We're using you to illustrate. Now imagine what would have happened the second time around. Well, now you're running on top of the name recognition, whatever it is, even if it's small, you're running on top of that already. Right. Yeah. And if you ran a good campaign, then you've left a good taste in the people's mouths. And so they're willing to listen. Some of those same people would be willing to listen, maybe a second go round. They might say, hey, they might be more willing to talk about somebody because people like to support somebody that they feel they know. Right. So if you're an outsider out of nowhere, I think it's very hard. But if you got a little name recognition, people kind of, they don't really vote based on policy. I mean, they like to say they do, but they basically vote who they like. That's really what it is. And so you create another opportunity to be more like. The problem with Tubb and Tracy was that I think Tubb had 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and 1 independent, right? So disregard the independent for a moment. Well, just forever, because it doesn't really matter.
$400,000 of his own money.
Right. But not only is
I can tell you the problem with Tubb, though. I'll get to that. I'll tell you the problem with Tubb, but go ahead, DJ.
Not only was he competing against 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, which made it a little bit harder, he was basically saying, hey, instead of 1 Democrat or 1 Republican, disregard both of them. Well, they had a choice. And so if you're a diehard Democrat, if you're a Republican that wants to vote Republican, if you're a Democrat that wants to vote Democrat, and you have 2 choices, then your chances are you're not going to give that third party even a look, because you got 2 choices to choose from, and maybe even 3 if maybe one of the other members of the one of the people running from the other party is more on the more moderate side or closer to you, right? Then you might even have 3. You might say, well, why do I even need to look at this third party guy? Same thing with Tracy. He had I think 1 or 2 less, but it was effectively
he had like 1 Republican, but like 5 Democrats,
something like that. I mean, and then on top of it, they monkeyed with his
district,
his districting. So they redistricted him right in the middle of his campaign.
Inside baseball, but like because of redistricting, was there an opportunity where, reverb, Tubb and Tracy could have ran in different district races? Because you remember when we first started like planning, we're like, well, you and Tracy live in the same district. You both can't run there. One's got to go at large. One's got to go district. But after redistricting, did you and Tracy end up in different districts?
Yes, because he was already running when it happened, he could have fallen into the other district.
Yeah.
It was just he was too far in and wouldn't have done him any good because the way
So
that it went. And then by the time it happened, I was so far more entrenched in.
Yeah, it was too late in the game.
yeah, outside of your district, you had a
Yeah.
lot of support. So it's
Now,
like I can't leave those people behind. You know,
Right.
And I'm in that new district, and here's the issue. Like, if we're going to talk locally and what we have going on, so the district that I'm in now historically does not run Republicans in that race. And so this is why I've been asking all these questions to everybody. I'm like, hey, listen, is there truly benefit in running as a libertarian, or is it just better off for us to say, hey, I'm going to take my libertarian thinking and I'm going to run in the Republican because it's easier. I'll have to deal with the fight. I'll get recognized. I'll get the support that we said from the beginning we tend not to get. And there'll be a level of help and support behind that. So then do we start going, hey, do we want to grow the party or do we want to extend liberty? Because if you take the few that we talked about that said, hey, these are pretty solid libertarian leaning Republicans.
Right.
But they got into office. They actually got in and able to do something. Justin Amash got in as a Republican.
Right.
Did not as a libertarian.
So I'll answer that. And I'm going to make a pretty bold statement here that may upset people, not you guys. If it were you, then I think, yes, there might be an opportunity for you to advance liberty and actually, or win and then advance liberty in that manner. Right. However, having interviewed quite a few libertarian candidates, I think the bigger problem is not we need to maybe jump ship and go to the Republican Party. We need to learn how to run campaigns better.
Exactly.
I think that is the bigger problem. And it's not just, oh, we need more money. Like, I remember, I'm not going to give you any names, but I remember interviewing some people and I would say, hey, so what are you about? And they're like, free speech. I'm like, okay, so what about free speech? More of it. It's like, you realize you're running for office, right? This is an open-ended question for you just to talk and win people over, because I can't win people over for you, right? And I didn't say this, but I ran into people that were like that. I ran into people that just simply did not have good answers. And I was like, if you don't have good answers for a libertarian who is on your side, how are you going to do when you meet somebody who's asking you the really tough questions and they want answers? How are you going to do? Because you're not selling me that you're going to be very good at that. And then I think we need to up our game in some ways. Like, one of the things that I tell people, and I think I told Tub this time or two, like, we need to, put on a suit and a tie sometimes. And the reason for that is because that's what voters expect. Now, people can argue and say, well, it really shouldn't matter. You don't get that choice. You're the candidate. You're trying to seek votes. What you get to do is, what do the voters expect? What is going to get the voters to turn their head and look at me, right? And sure, maybe you can go the extreme route and wear a boot on your head and they're going to look at you, but are they going to look at you as an actual viable candidate? Or are they going to look at you and go, God, what a weirdo, and then look over here at the man wearing a suit and a tie and say, he's probably got his stuff together, even though it's very possible that the man in the tie is a total tyrant and the guy with the boot on his head would have actually been better, right? Like, it's possible, but that's not how voters are thinking, especially non-libertarian voters, which we need. So I think the first and foremost thing for most people is they got to figure out, if I'm running for office, how do I run and do well? And how do I stack up in all ways, visually, policy, my demeanor, how I deliver, how I speak? How do I stack up against all of these other candidates who have been preparing? My wife made a very interesting observation a while back, unrelated to you guys. We knew somebody that was thinking about running for office. And I think they might have actually run, I can't remember what position, but he was locally here in Jacksonville. And she said, now mind you, my wife hates politics. She doesn't like talking about it. She doesn't follow it very well because she's not interested. She said, did you know that so-and-so changed all of his Facebook pictures? And I was like, really? She's like, yeah, all of his pictures went from just him to pictures of him and his family. And she's like, he's running for office. Like, she noticed that they changed their social media because they were getting ready to run for office, or they were considering it, right? And she noticed that, right? So voters notice this kind of thing. And so I think in every single way, if you're not a good speaker, get your ass to Toastmasters. Start practicing, right? You can become a good speaker. Hey, if you don't have a suit and a tie, go buy a tie and just a cheap white shirt from Walmart and wear that, and then run home and wash it before the next day, right? Do what you got. Do what you got to do to put on a, a good presentation. If you get stuck sometimes when people are asking you questions, grab a friend and say, throw random questions at me. Just start practicing. Figure.
DL made me cut off my mullet. Okay,
I don't
he
think I made
forced
you-
me.
I want to thank you for that.
He held me down with clippers and cut my hair.
Okay, so
So
That
that's
did
what I
not
think
happen.
people need to do. Tub
But
did
I
some
did
great
cut
things
my
that I
mullet.
commended him for. Like, I know Tub would come back and be like, "Hey, here's this conversation that I had with this donor," right? And the details of the conversation. I'm like, "Wow, that's a pretty smart idea," right? Like, I feel like we have to really be thinking, like, how do I actually win, and what does it take? And yes, winning will take doing things that you don't want to do, and it's that way everywhere. You want to beat the other candidates for that job, you gotta stand out, right? You
word.
want to make your business successful, you gotta stand out. You want to capture that guy or girl's heart, you gotta stand out. Everywhere in life, you have to stand out because there's always competition. And for libertarians, this should not be a hard ass question because we always talk about economics and competition and how great it is. So we should be like the best at it, and we're not.
So as we wrap this up, I want to do a little roundtable on closing statements, and we're going to
Sure.
start off with DL. Then we'll go to Tub. Then we'll go to Eric. Then we'll go to me. But in your closing statement, this is the question I pose to you all. What do you think the Libertarian Party has to do to remain relevant over the next 4 years? DL.
I think they need to stay active locally. That way, when they run a candidate in the future that's at the state level or even at the national level, people already have a sense of, oh, the Libertarian Party. Like Eric said earlier, he said, hey, I ran into some people and they didn't even know what LPF was. They were like, is that liberal? What is that? Right. So that should be the goal at the local level, is to make sure that people know who you are. So when you say the Libertarian Party, people are like, they recognize something. I talked to a guy, I'll end it on this. I talked to a guy a long time ago, sometime after Gary Johnson was running. And this guy, he was an anarchist. I don't think he was really much into voting in the first place. But he said, when I heard Gary Johnson, first speak, he goes, I knew he wasn't a libertarian. Now, I could have argued about whether or not Gary Johnson was a real libertarian or not. But instead, what I told that guy, I said, what would your family have said? Because if your family and friends wouldn't have said the same thing, then you haven't been communicating with them enough. You're like I've had friends who are like, DL, what's going on with, like my friends have reached out and they're like, why is it you guys seem like you're supporting Trump? That doesn't seem right, DL. That doesn't make sense to me based on everything that I've ever talked to you about, right? Like my friends and family will ask me questions because they can't get me to shut up about it. So, they have a sense of the Libertarian Party. So if they hear Libertarian Party, something in their mind has already been laid and set up.
I forgot who I said next.
Me.
You said Tub next.
Yeah, I got it. So I think that the first thing we have to do in order to get back and get us focused again is we have to grow up. We have to grow up and act like a real political party. We can look at the other two parties and go, hey, we hate them. Yes. But you know what? They got to where we want to be. So maybe there are some things we need to look at them and go, hey, maybe we need to mimic that a little bit. So we need to kind of grow up. We need to stop infighting. I'm just right now. It's not getting better at all. Our chair ran the first time on the fact that she was going to stop the infighting. I think she's only made it worse, and it's reached a whole nother level now. So, like I said before, if we're going to get somebody in, we got to make sure we get them in and keep them in. And that's only going to happen if we get rid of the infighting. And I would tell you kind of lastly, which is we completely, I don't know what's happening to us. We need to get back to focusing on candidates. Like that has to be our priority. We are a political party. All of this other stuff and being a social club that argues online does not fulfill the role of a political party. And we've gotten so far away from just having candidates that we get ecstatic over these wins that we're calling wins that really have nothing to do with what should be our purpose. So I would say grow up, stop infighting, and focus on candidates again.
All right. I will expound, but slightly disagree when Tubb says infighting. I think we should get away from the culture wars, but whenever the leadership isn't doing a good job, they should be held accountable. Now, if it's a leadership you respect, obviously maybe not do it publicly, but if someone you don't respect and you feel like they should be held accountable, I think they deserve being called out. I want to expound on that. And DL, we had not a serious disagreement, but on Twitter where you said former candidates should never hold, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond. Former candidates should never be critical of their party leadership. I disagree. I ran as a libertarian to speak truth to power. And if it's happening in my own party where they're bending the knee to the establishment, they deserve to be called out. And if you're going to run as a libertarian and you see your own party doing unlibertarian things, they deserve to be called out. So, yeah.
All right.
Do you want me to respond to that or no? That's what he said.
Yeah.
If you want to, you don't have to.
I mean,
cool. Since his name was inflicted.
I mean, I'm a podcast.
It's not a debate, but
I'm a podcast, bro. I always have something to say. No, I hear Chase made that big mistake, right? So he ran as a candidate for Senate, and during that time, he was engaging in infighting, and the members did not forget that. And so then when he went on to run for president, a lot of the people were pointing that out. They were like, "Oh, look what he said about us. Look what he said here. Look what he said there." It all came back to haunt him. So I think if in our exchange on Twitter, what I had said to you, one of the things I said, look, if you're planning on never running for any office again, then sure, have at it. But if you think you might run for office, you probably shouldn't, because even if you take on, let's just say that you criticize me as the chair, fine, right? You're like, I think DL's a terrible chair. Anybody that likes me now is probably going to be against you, and they have no reason to change, right? And so now you've lost potential voters, you've lost potential donors, supporters. It's just not good. Candidates, they're in a precarious position. Their job is to get votes and money. That's their job.
So my only rebuttal to that is if your job is to get money and votes and that's it, and not to speak truth to power, then you should probably run as an establishment Republican or Democrat.
Well,
You'll get way more votes.
Hold up.
You'll get way more money.
If you're running for public office, you're not running to fix the Libertarian Party. You're running to fix the U.S. government. So that's what your focus needs to be on.
Yeah, but if you're running for office, you're running to win. So if
right. If you're running,
I got as much donations.
Criticize away. If you're running,
I got as many donations from Republicans as I got from Libertarians. So now imagine had I ran as a Republican, would I got the same amount of money or less? Because Libertarians wouldn't give it to me.
If you were,
would I got more
criticizing leadership, you were going to turn off a lot of potential voters and donors. If you're,
well, I mean,
the same would apply there.
Yeah, I'm saying actively as you're running, you might not want to criticize
or if you're planning on running in the
you're
future.
in.
People don't forget.
Well, yeah.
So as
we'll
for me, and at some point I would like to run. I'm the only person here that hasn't run.
Well, and that's another thing. Also, I wanted to make this point. If former candidates that are planning on running shouldn't criticize their party leadership, then Tubb and I probably shouldn't have been on this podcast.
Well, I don't know about that. Maybe, I don't know about you in particular, Eric, but Tubb, I kind of agree with him never being on this podcast.
I'm down.
And specifically, excuse me, sir, I gave you your time, sir.
Eric,
I want to say specifically, it's because of Tubb's face why I think he shouldn't have been on this podcast. Nothing other, because he makes some eloquent points, but his face is distracting and disturbing. That would be weird. He has a face for radio.
You're like, dude, you hate the fact that you're attracted to me, and that bothers you because you don't know how to handle those feelings.
I have never been attracted from
From
to
me.
a
Keep going.
European in my life, and I'm married to a Mexican woman. And undoubtedly, she has a high percentage of Spaniard in her. So I may sound like a hypocrite, but there is no way on God's green earth at any point would I hug Tub with any kind of passion and respect, other than him being a libertarian. And that's where I think libertarians need to find their common ground. That we can have people like myself, the only real libertarian, and Tub, the ugliest libertarian, DL Cummings, one of the most profound libertarians, and Eric Parker, who decided to move to North Kakalaki to be around more ancestral libertarians. We need, as libertarians, to accept each other for who we are, because there's Republicans that accepted PDF individuals. There's Democrats that accepted mentally ill individuals. And libertarians, we have such infighting where we can't have different opinions and accept each other. Because I think it's, right now the battle on Capitol Hill is on who could use the bathroom.
Right.
Right now, the battle on Capitol Hill is, should we overlook this dude's immoral indiscretions? And that's what they're fighting about. What do libertarians fight about? Philosophy.
Right.
We're not fighting about anything that's concrete or evident in real life. We're battling over issues that could be settled at a bar on a Friday night over a couple of cold brewskis, which Tub wouldn't indulge in because he's square.
He'll have one.
I can have one.
Okay. And, that's the thing where I think libertarians are failing to understand the American people, is we can disagree. We used to be a country that, because back in the 80s, I'm a weird kid, okay? I was a weird kid, an adult, because I followed the news. I read the newspaper. I watched the nightly news with Peter Jennings, because I always wanted to know why. And that's one thing I truly thank my parents for, is always telling me to ask why things are the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't ask that question without going back 50 to 150 years at bare minimum. That's just the layman's terms on asking why. It's 50 to 150 years. If you're getting more scientific and specific about it, and I'm proud of myself that I said specific and not Pacific as a black man. But if you want to get specific about it, you need to go back 200 to 500 years as to why we are where we are right now. And that's what libertarians aren't doing. And that's why we're not expanding our tent. We're not asking why people feel the way they are. We're just going by this Mises philosophy or whoever's philosophy, and we're stuck. And what's the difference between that and Democrats and Republicans?
Right.
Nothing. And if we're truly going to be a third party that is relevant, we need to expand our tent and expand our minds and leave it to the best ideas instead of the best feelings that people typically have. And that's my truck rant. Only thing I'm missing is my Chevy symbol and my back seats right now.
Well, I just want to say that I think you're articulate and bright and clean and nice looking guy.
I get where you go with that one.
As the exact opposite to Tub. That's exactly what I am. Because Tub is dark, demented, and it's kind of weird. Eric, you're all right, bro. I like you. And I truly miss my brother, Michael White. Yeah. Michael White, I miss you, brother. I need you to come on. If you want to be a guest or a host, I don't give a flying.
Dude, if Michael comes on, you're out.
I mean, that's the way you people have always operated. So I just assume that's the case.
We got enough white people now. We don't need that black guy anymore.
I'm the only one that doesn't put raisins in potato salad here, because DL, he's only what are you, 3% North African?
Like 2%. I think it was
2%. My bad for giving you that plus percentage point on your
50% increase.
He's more
Yeah.
black than you.
man. Okay. We're gonna start wrapping this up right now. Is
All right.
there anything else any of you people have to say in the end of this? The only true libertarian podcast that exists in this world is the Black Powder Podcast, led to you by the only real libertarian, Marcus Matthews. That's me right there. We got Tub, Eric Parker, our special guest DL Cummings. DL, tell the people where they can reach you and see you and do all of that stuff.
So if you want to find me on YouTube, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, rumble.libertydad.com, or you can find me on X, Twitter, if you like to call it, Liberty Dad Pod. Just go look that up. You're going to find me. And then just Liberty Dad on Facebook, although you're going to find me more active on with my streaming on Rumble and on YouTube, and then just active engaging with people on X or Twitter.
Word. Tub, where could they possibly want to see you or
church on Sunday?
Yeah, come see me at church on Sunday. That's the best place. And that, Marcus, especially for you. So, no, listen, Facebook is not letting me do anything, dude. So and it's a shame because that's where my bigger audience is and everything is on Facebook, but they're not letting me do anything. So I just mess around with Twitter a little bit.
I don't blame Facebook one iota. Eric, where can we find you and listen to you or get your opinions on stuff?
I'm more active with my random thoughts on Twitter. Got a little hate yesterday for a slight joke I tried making. Yeah, I thought it was funny. Still think it's funny. But you can also find me on Facebook. So Facebook, it's Eric Parker Bold Liberty, and Twitter X, it is Eric P904. I think that's all I'm really active on right now.
Okay. And as always, you can find us here on Facebook on the Black Powder Podcast, on Twitter as the other black guy that likes gun show, and I think that's YouTube as well. I want to thank everybody except Tub and slightly Eric for coming on. I want to thank DL Cummings for coming on, staying up late with us tonight for almost an hour and a half. And as usual, I firmly believe in individual liberty, and I want to tell everybody who listened and watched, live free or die.
Oh,
that is our motto we end with.
Or die.
Yeah. And here comes the pause.
Or die.
Or die.